What is going on, everybody? The original Mako back with another guide type of video, an updated version of the best builds on every single character. Since I made the last video, we obviously have some new characters, some things that I think, some builds that I think might be a little better on other characters. So this is going to be a great video, and I'm excited to get into it. But before we do, first of all, can you tell what day I'm recording this? I'm recording this on game day. But check the links down below. As always, if you want to see me test out these builds or use these builds live, the Twitch link is right down below. Also, there's a link down below to take you to the member page. Now, if you go to the member page, you'll see there are 4 tiers where you can become a member on YouTube. Each tier getting yourself some unique perks, some fun, cool little things, and it helps support the channel out a ton. As you can see on screen, we have a list of our members here. I can't thank them enough. The extra support means a lot, and I just really, really appreciate it. So that being said, we'll go ahead and get ready to get into the best builds for every character. Now, I want to preface this by saying these are my opinions. There are a few characters that I have a lot more experience on, and a few characters I have a lot less. However, I feel plenty confident enough to make a decent, point on why I think each of these builds is the best build for the given character. Almost every character has plenty of different builds that you can do that are perfectly effective, but these are the ones that I think are the best for every single character. So let's go ahead and get it rocking and get it started. First, we are going to start with the cat. Now, the cat is pretty straightforward to me, and I don't think it's even remotely close on builds. But the build that I highly recommend going for the most is an elemental build. That's what this entire, the cat is just, that's what it's known for, is elemental builds. Super good at buffing elemental stuff. So how it's going to work is I will give you the top 3 things. Could be a weapon, it could be an ascension, it could be a remnant, just pretty much anything, but I'm going to give you the top 3 for this build, and then each build also has at least one honorable mention to talk about, but it'll just kind of help you get rolling on the build and kind of see where the build goes. So the first thing for the cat's elemental build, and the whole, what this is all built around, is Elemental Maestro, which is a remnant. Now, obviously, if you're not playing in reincarnation difficulty, you can't get a remnant, but a lot of these builds are kind of built around remnants. However, that's why the honorable mention is there, because then if you can't get the remnant, then just lean towards the honorable mention. All of these builds can absolutely work, for the most part, in normal and reincarnation difficulties. So anyways, Elemental Maestro, you gain a buff for 4 seconds every 10 seconds, and you get 100% elemental damage and guaranteed elemental effects with this buff. So the wording's a little weird, but essentially you get a buff for 4 seconds that guarantees if your weapon is elemental, it will deal elemental damage, and it increases your elemental damage. And then after it goes away, you have a 6-second break, and then the buff comes back. So if we want to talk percentages, this means for 40% of your run, you will have a buff where you are guaranteed to do elemental damage and increased elemental damage. Combine this with the cat's corrosive grenade, and you've got yourself corrosion plus lightning if you have a lightning weapon, corrosion plus fire if you have a fire weapon, and guaranteeing either getting explosive elemental synergy or miasma elemental synergy is phenomenal. This is bar none maybe the this is kind of tough to say. There's a lot of really, really good builds, but this is one of the most consistent, easiest builds to beat the game. And in fact, when people come into chat and recommend, I say, hey, I'm stuck here, what do you recommend I do? I always instantly say I recommend elemental build. Play the cat, do an elemental build. It's so much fun and so goddamn good. But Elemental Maestro is the first part of this. The second part of this are the 3 different dominances for ascensions. I can't pick just one because it really depends on what you're trying to do. I will kind of order them here and explain why I think that. So we have Pyro Dominance, which increases fire damage, and at tier 3 doubles the damage caused by burning and the combustion effect, which is fire and corrosion. Electro Dominance, which is increased lightning damage and plus 120% weapon damage against enemies who are shocked at tier 3. And then Acid Dominance, which is increased corrosion damage, and crit hits against enemy will create a toxic cloud equivalent to a detonated smoke grenade up to once every 3 seconds at tier 3. So these are the meat of the run. You're going to want to, whatever weapon you choose to go with, whether it's a fire weapon, a lightning weapon, or I don't recommend a corrosion weapon because you have corrosion built in. This is going to be the meat that buffs this build. You're going to get a huge increase to damage. If you're running a fire weapon, you double the damage caused by burning and combustion. And the combustion effect, which is the explosion with fire and corrosion, when you proc that, let's say you have a fire weapon, whatever hit procs that deals triple damage. So if you're doubling that, you're doing 6 times damage every time you proc the combustion effect, which is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. 6 times damage, which is just straight up ridiculous. Electro Dominance just gives you a massive buff, basically plus 240% damage if an enemy is under shock. And then the Acid Dominance buffs your grenades like crazy, and if you're maybe you're not able to get your grenades out as often. Maybe you're run out of grenades. If you have this at tier 3, if you crit an enemy, you will basically proc a grenade every 3 seconds, which gives you the elemental synergy that you need. So the Pyro, Acid, and Electro Dominances are, I can't just pick one out of those 3, so I grouped them all together as one thing for this build, and they are quite important. Third, last but certainly not least, we have ourselves Elemental Power, which is a scroll that you can get, and it is extremely good for this build for one reason. The 25% elemental damage is nice, but when you trigger an elemental effect, it will be passed to a nearby random enemy. You are going to be triggering elemental effects constantly. So being able to chain that around on this build is unbelievably ridiculous, and I don't, there's not much else I need to say besides if you're already completely dominating one enemy, being able to do it to another enemy at the same time is insane and incredible. So Elemental Power is pivotal. Trying to get this for this build, it really just ties everything together. It's not necessary, but it will tie the entire build together, in my opinion. So last, here we have our honorable mention, which didn't quite make it because it doesn't specifically fit in with this build, but it's so good on the cat that I can't not talk about it, and that would be Hex Smoke. Enemies hit by smoke grenades deal less damage and take more damage for 6 or 20 seconds. Damage reduction, I talk about all the time, is super important, and being able to do more damage to enemies is obviously fantastic, but really it's the damage reduction here. You want that damage reduction for high level, high difficulty, if you're on Reincarnation 5+, any Reincarnation really. So Hex Smoke needs to be mentioned as an honorable mention, so here it is. But that's why it's an honorable mention, it doesn't just fully fit in. So there we go, that's it for the cat. Elemental build, it's ridiculous, it's insane, it's phenomenal. If you haven't done it, please do. Next, we move on to the dog, and this one was actually kind of, I guess, slightly difficult for me to decide, although not really, because it's kind of, the best build on the dog is Atomic Bomb, which, if you don't have Remnants unlocked, let's say you haven't played Reincarnation or you haven't unlocked it, you won't know what this is. So Explosions / Atomic Bomb is the best build. Everything I'm going to talk about can work on non-Reincarnation difficulties if you just don't take the Atomic, don't worry about the atomic bomb, but everything else can still work. You can still do a grenade build that's good. It's just not going to really be the build that we're talking about. So this is pretty much the only character where you kind of have to be on reincarnation for it to work. So let's talk about it. Atomic bomb. When using a secondary skill, there is a 40% chance to toss all of your remaining grenades without consuming uses. You get plus 50% explosive grenade damage for 1 second every time a grenade deals damage, and the new version caps it at 1000%. It doesn't really matter. That doesn't really mean much. So essentially, if you've got 8 grenades, there's a chance you just throw all of your grenades without consuming any of your uses. And you get plus, if they all hit the same target, then by the end, your grenade is doing like, what is that, plus 2,000%, well, I guess plus 1,000% damage, which is insane for obvious reasons. If you haven't used it, then please watch one of my videos on it. Just look up like atomic bomb or something, because you have to see how insane this is to really grasp it. When you first hear it, it can be like, well, it sounds cool to throw all my grenades, but is that really going to be worth an entire build? Yes, it is. It's the fastest killing build in the entirety of the game, unless you get extremely lucky on like the Tiger and you're able to one-shot everything. Then this is the fastest killing just build in the entirety of the game. So it is definitely worth doing this as a build. So Atomic Bomb is the first part of this explosive build. The second thing we are going to talk about and add in here is an Ascension, and that would be Grenade Master. So grenades have plus an increased base damage, which is obviously great because we just get even extra damage on top. But there's also a chance to just not consume a grenade when you throw it. And at tier 3, you also get a grenade every 10 seconds. So basically what this is doing for the build is adding longevity. In order to get, it's only a 40% chance that you're going to throw all your grenades. So less than half the time, you're going to be throwing all of them. And when you're not throwing all of them, you want to be conserving as many grenades as possible, because obviously the more grenades you have, the more grenades you throw, the more hits you get, which means the more damage you do. So Grenade Master here is just a way to help keep the longevity of the build. They're early in the build, it's going to be pretty consistently, you're going to be running out of grenades a lot. So Grenade Master is really important to get as quick as possible, especially to tier 3. So that way you can just keep those grenades coming in, rolling, and getting hot with it. So Grenade Master, I think, is absolutely needed for this build. And then the last, but most certainly not least, part of this build that we're going to talk about that I think is just necessary. Well, not necessary, but like if you want to maximize this build, you're going to want Double Exhilaration, which is a scroll that pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. The secondary skill capacity gets doubled. So if you can originally hold 8 grenades, you can now hold 16 grenades. Why is this important? Well, now you're throwing 16 grenades at an enemy instead of 8, which means even more damage that you get to do. Once again, it caps at 1,000, but if you hit all 16 grenades, then as soon as you hit the damage cap, every grenade after that is still doing 1,000% extra damage. And it is just like I said, it's a speed killing machine. Enemies get rinsed by this. It's incredible, and obviously Double Exhilaration helps out a ton. And then, any sort of skill damage buffs you're going to want to look for as well. But this scroll is the one that I think is the best scroll for this build. And then we do have the honorable mention, which it was really hard to not put these as important parts of the build because of just how good they are. But we've got 2 ascensions here to talk about. First one is double explosions, which means you toss 2 grenades instead of 1 with no additional consumption. So this means if you have double exhilaration, you're holding 16 grenades, and you proc the atomic bomb, you're going to throw 32 grenades at an enemy. 32 grenades at an enemy. So for obvious reasons, we have double explosions in here. And then the other one was explosion enhancement, which the biggest reason for this is, I mean, obviously you get increased damage, but the big thing is the AoE. Being able to do damage in a larger area means you're maybe hitting multiple enemies with one set of grenades instead of hitting just one enemy. So AoE on any sort of explosive build is huge. I just couldn't put it in the top 3 because I think the other 3 things are just a little bit more pivotal for this build. So there we go. That is the dog's build. It is atomic bomb, and it is marvelous, and it is my favorite build in the entire game. Once you do it a few times, you know it can get a little. It's the same thing, but if you haven't tried this build, please try it. And even if you've done it before and you think maybe I could have gotten this to maximize it, try to get a crazy build where you're throwing 32 grenades and just let it take over and have fun with it. This build is so much fun, and I love it. It's my favorite build in the game. So there we have it for the dog. Next, we've got the Birdman. And for a while, and I should have rewatched the video so I could have compared like the builds that I'm doing now for older characters versus the builds I did then. But for a while, I would say the best build on the bird would have been an armor grabbing build, like just trying to insane defense and go crazy on armor. But with some relatively recent patches, the bird got access to a remnant that changes things, and that remnant and the build we are doing is a leap build on the bird. And the big part of this build is the remnant unstoppable momentum. For each enemy hit by a leap, you get plus 100% leap base damage and gain a 5% chance to reset your cooldown. This can go up to 10 stacks. However, you lose all of your stacks if you miss your leap. So if you use your leap defensively, if you use it for movement, whatever, you lose all your stacks. So you don't really want to, so as you can see on the right, you know, stacks don't decay, so you can have permanent plus 10, but if you use it for a non-offensive reason, you will lose all of them. So at plus 10 stacks, leap gets 1000% increase in base damage, and a 50% chance to just instantly reset the cooldown. So the whole goal of this build is to be spamming your leap, like non-stop leaping. The damage is going to be there thanks to unstoppable momentum. And like I said, the goal eventually is going to be, you just want to be spamming the E button. As the, you know, hopefully most of you know, as the bird, you get armor instead of shield, which means when you leap and you hit an enemy, you get armor back. Your shield doesn't regenerate by killing things. You have to hit something with your leap. So if you're constantly leaping, you constantly have iframes during the leap, and you're constantly getting armor back. And if you're just killing everything, this is a steamroll type of build. So the first part of the leap build, unstoppable momentum. The next part of the leap build that I think is extremely important is last breath. This is one of the ascensions. And it deals increased leap damage, which, once again, unstoppable momentum cannot carry. It will fall off if you don't have some extra help, so last breath is some extra help. And then, leap's remaining cooldown is lowered for every kill, but if you get it to tier 3, then every time you kill an enemy, your leap is back. Guaranteed. Which this is the... It's not the key part, because unstoppable momentum is the key, but this is a very, very important part, because you want to be spamming your leap. And the best way to do that is to guarantee to to get it back every single time you kill an enemy. You're going to be killing a lot of enemies. I promise you the damage on this build is ridiculous. So it's not like you're going to be leaping, hitting an enemy down to half health, and then you're like, well, shit, now I'm kind of screwed. You're going to be resetting your leap pretty constantly. Obviously, some enemies are going to tank it, but most are going to get rolled. So having this at tier 3 is amazing to help supplement your ability to just spam through all of the enemies with your leap. And for part 3, we have another combo here because you can't talk about one without the other, because they work together to become the third part of this bird build. And that would be All or Nothing and Regen Hit, which are 2 more Ascensions, but we'll talk about All or Nothing first, which is when you hit an enemy with Leap, you consume all of your armor to increase the damage by 1.2% per consumed armor point. So if you have 130 armor, you use this, you're going to be getting about 160%, somewhere around there. Maybe it's not quite right. It's somewhere around that additional leap damage. Yeah, so once again, this is just another way to help increase damage. You want to be killing things as often as possible, which means you need damage, and this is a really good way to help damage. The issue with this is that you use up all of your armor. So that's why you have to pair it with Regen Hit, which is another Ascension, where after a leap, you restore 40%, 100%, or 100% armor if it hits, and some if you miss as well. The miss is less important because All or Nothing does not proc unless you hit. But so as soon as you get this to tier 2, you're good, because every time you hit, you're restoring 100% of your armor. So you use all your armor, and then you restore all your armor immediately. And that is the order it goes in. So you leap, you hit, all your armor goes away to deal extra damage, but then all of your armor comes right back. So these two combined work super well together. They're both okay on their own. Regen Hit is definitely a lot better on its own without All or Nothing. But you want to try to get both of these and use that as the third part of the bird's crazy build, because this is going to be kind of a not only increased damage, but a very, very, very good defensive survivability addition to this build. So that's why we have this here. And then the honorable mention is extremely good on the bird in general, but especially for this build as well. We just talked about the more shield you have, the more damage you do. So how about we have Paranormality as our honorable mention? Another great part of this build. It doesn't give you quite as much without like All or Nothing. So that's why I don't have it in the top 3 for the bird on the leap build. But pretty much anytime you're playing the bird, you want to have Paranormality, and especially if you get All or Nothing, you really want to look for it. So Paranormality is just a great scroll, and if you're doing a leap build on the bird, you absolutely want to keep your eyes peeled, because this will help you out immensely. So Paranormality as the honorable mention for the leap build on the bird, and that will complete our bird best build. Best bird boy in the house with his leap build. Next up, we go to the tiger. Now, this is one where some of you in the comments might get a little upset, because I have maybe the least experience on the tiger. I mean, I understand the character as a whole, but I don't play him a ton, so there's probably a lot of builds that I don't know about, and a lot of really good builds that you guys have had that you think are a little bit better, and some better scrolls, some better ascensions, anything really. But I am going to be talking about my personal favorite build if I was running the tiger, or the build that I think is the best when I run the tiger. And that is just going to go to a super high damage sniping build. So just trying to maximize your damage in a single shot. And so let's talk about, we don't have a remnant for this one actually, so let's talk about the top 3 things for this build. Now, the first part of this is interesting because this is the only character where I have something on here that I think this character needs on every single build, regardless. So I have to put it up here. That would be Voltic Aegis. Now this is an ascension on the Tiger. You obtain 1 stack every 4 seconds, 3 seconds, or 3 seconds. Or you obtain stacks faster during your Fatal Current. Every stack of Voltic Aegis increases your shields and grants you increased damage reduction. It can stack up to a certain amount of times, and then you lose a stack every time you take damage. So let's go ahead and just say this is a tier 3. Then you're getting stacks pretty often. It gives you an increase of up to 60, an increase of up to 100 shield and 100% damage reduction, which is really, really good for obvious reasons. Those reasons being the Tiger is the squishiest character in the entirety of the game, so I don't give a rat's ass what build you're doing. If you're playing on Reincarnation 8 on the Tiger and you don't have Voltic Aegis or some sort of damage, like a defensive scroll that's really, really good, you are going to have a horrible time, I promise. Regardless of how good your offense is, it doesn't take much to knock out the Tiger instantaneously if there's no Voltic Aegis or some sort of other really, really good defensive combo. So I felt like Voltic Aegis has to be part of this build, even though technically it has nothing to do with super high damage output, but I just can't not have it on here because of how vital I think it is. If you're playing on normal mode, you can obviously get away without having it, but I think as soon as you start getting into like Reincarnation 3 or 4 and up, it's a necessity. So that's why we have Voltic Aegis on here. Next up, we have a scroll, which would be Hawkeye Sight. Plus 2 crit multiplier, however, minus 50% damage when you're not triggering a crit. Also, weapons with a scope will gain double zoom. This one is on here for, once again, it seems like relatively obvious reasons. If we're using a sniper or a high damage weapon of any sorts, we want to have a high crit multiplier because, you know, with a sniper, you should be trying to crit as often as possible because that's how you're going to get the most damage out of your build, is by hitting crits. You're going to kill faster, you're going to hit harder. It's kind of a big deal. So the higher crit multiplier you have, the better. So that's why we have Hawkeye Sight on here. I don't think I need to go into too much detail about it. I mean, the crit multiplier is just fantastic. The damage output you're going to see is insane. And it works really well with the next part of this build, and something that is new. And the third part I am giving to the Hexagon. Now listen to me, Tiger players. There's a lot of you that are probably like, excuse me, there are so many good weapons you can use on the Tiger. It's probably not that important, but listen. When I play the Tiger, there's one reason I'm doing it, and one reason only. I am trying to go absolutely trombone mode on hitting a high damage shot. I just want to see the highest number possible on the build. And what better way to do that than with the brand new Hexagon, which hits like a bus. Now I know it got nerfed, but it still has the highest single shot potential in the entirety of the game. Now, it is a little bit, I don't want to say finicky is not the right word, but you have to do things in the correct order and kind of be, have your brain pretty turned on to use it. Not in like a sexual way, in like a, you know, paying attention way. Because in order to use it, you know, you have to have your shield ready. You have to hit the E ability, your Fatal Current ability, and then pop your shield, because you cannot use your E while the shield is up. So you have to use the E, pop the shield, block attacks, and then the tracking shot will seek out and use the Fatal Current to deal a ass load of damage. This is how I think you can get the highest damage possible in a single shot. I think the Hexagon is the way to do it. I'm sure there's a lot of ways to get a lot of damage, but the Hexagon seems to be, once again, the easiest way to do it if you know the order to kind of use your abilities and whatnot. So I felt like the Hexagon needed to be on here. its damage potential was just too good, and because of the super high single damage shot, I felt like it deserved to be part of the top 3 for the Tiger. And then last, we have our honorable mention on the Tiger, which goes to an Ascension, and that would be Storm Blast, which is a increased damage for the first shot that hits an enemy during Fatal Current. So once again, say you're using a Hexagon, then all of a sudden your tracking shot gets plus 300% extra damage. A weapon that is already unbelievable with its damage output gets plus 300% extra damage, assuming this is at tier 3. I mean, it's obvious why this is getting mentioned, hopefully, for this build. So there we go. That's what we have for the Tiger, a super high damage single shot build, and there it is. I'm curious, once again, I'd have to go back and look. I think the last build video, I think by that time the Tiger concealed ammo build was already nerfed. But if not, I guarantee you I went with that build, because that was the only time I had fun with the Tiger. Had a lot of fun with the Tiger, was with that build. So anyways, that's what we're doing for the Tiger. Next up, we go to my second favorite character behind the dog. And, well, it's kind of close, but my second favorite build behind the dog, and that is the Bunny's Blossom build. Okay? So first, I think we have to talk about Fatal Bloom, which is the Q ability, which is what this entire build is based around of. So you can get a little bit of a base knowledge of how this ability works. So you summon petals in front of you that explode outwards, marking all enemies within 6 meters, and it deals 400 damage. This mark lasts for 6 seconds, and every time you hit, every time you deal damage to an enemy 12 times, it'll deal an additional 400 damage. So this is really good, and immediately you can think, okay, so there's high rate of fire, we want to be hitting enemies as much as possible. Okay, I just wanted, in case somebody didn't know what this Fatal Bloom was, give a quick baseline. So for the Fatal Bloom build, the Q ability, what do we want? First and foremost, we want Blossom Enthusiast. One of the most shocking changes from the DLC was this one. So the new Blossom Enthusiast, which is a remnant, is hitting an enemy with hitting an unmarked enemy will mark them with Fatal Bloom. So immediately, you don't have to use your Q, you don't have to press Q on the keyboard to mark an enemy with Fatal Bloom anymore. You just have to hit them with a weapon or any damage, and they will be marked. And then it's also -8 hits required to trigger the additional damage of Fatal Bloom, which means instead of 12 hits, we only need to do 4 hits. And as you can see on the right, it triples how often damage occurs, and if you have Glowing Bloom tier 3, it quintuples the amount of times damage occurs. So, as you can see, if we're using, I don't know, an Angelic Aura, an Illusion, which shoots way more than 4 projectiles per shot, then we're dealing an additional 400 or 600 or however much damage every second at least. At least. Okay, so, and then not having to use your Q means, you can never run out of Qs. It means every single enemy that you hit will be marked with Fatal Bloom, and you will get to use that ability. Whereas beforehand, there might be sometimes when you run out of Qs and can't do it, or, you maybe just don't want to, you've been spamming Q so much and you missed an enemy and you're like, I'm just going to kill this enemy normally, whatever. But with this, you don't have to worry about that because every enemy you hit will get marked, and you can do the additional damage. So there you go. Outside of Atomic Bomb, maybe the single most broken remnant in the entirety of the game after the change to it. It's and not only that, but -8 hits too. I mean, it's the value is ridiculous. So that's part 1 of the Blossom build. Part 2 is going to go to something that was talked about, and that is Glowing Bloom. So Glowing Bloom just increases the damage that Fatal Bloom does, and at tier 3 is a -2 hits. So If you've got Blossom Enthusiast and Glowing Bloom at tier 3, it takes 2 additional hits. 2 additional hits. That's it. And if you have Glowing Bloom at tier 3, then your base damage is, I believe, either 1800 or 2400. Which means every time you hit an enemy twice, you're dealing an additional either 1800 or 2400 damage. Which is nothing to shake a stick at. It's really, really good. And Glowing Bloom has to be here for obvious reasons, because you want to see that damage go up as high as possible. Same reason why you want any and all skill damage buffs. But this is an important one because it's an Ascension and has a really good tier 3 effect. So that's why Glowing Bloom's here. It's a super good complementary piece to this build. As is the last part, which is another Remnant, actually. However, this one is not an exclusive. It is for everybody. So there's a 75% chance for a secondary skill to deal 200% damage, and a 25% chance to deal 300% damage. As you can see on the right, it's an average of a plus 125% multiplicative damage buff, which is very good. And with this, there's a 1 out of every 4 times you hit an enemy, then your Fatal Bloom is going to be doing triple damage, essentially, if you get the plus 300%. So let's say you're doing 1800 damage, triple that, and we're talking about 5400 damage every 2 hits if you've got Glowing Bloom in tier 3. I mean, the amount of help that this does with damage output is just too good to pass up on. This has to be part of the top 3, and it's just something you're gonna want to get and use the save quit method to find it. If you're going for this Glowing Bloom build, it is just phenomenal. I can't. The triple damage 25% of the time is insane and super useful. So that's why it's on here. And then our honorable mention is also another pretty obvious one. It very easily could have made this list. It's just the other 3 I think are just slightly better. But Spirit Bible, a scroll that gives you plus 120% skill damage. This just gives you a permanent plus 120% buff to your Glowing Bloom damage, which is the whole point of this. So any skill damage scroll is what you want to look for. I think this one is the best because it's just super consistent. There's no catch to it. It's just 120% skill damage buff. Here you go. Take it. It's yours. It'll be a very, very solid piece. And if you can get the enhanced version, then oh boy, start recording. Buy a capture card, record it, and just keep it for memories. Something to pass down to your grandkids, honestly, because you're going to be doing an unbelievable amount of damage per second. It's such a fun build. I still cannot believe it got buffed in the DLC. It boggles my mind how that happened, but it did. So the Glowing Bloom build on the bunny, I believe, is the best build for the bunny. Next up, we go to the Hedgehog, and the Hedgehog is, okay, for the more, sophisticated, it's a turtle technically. All right. I think he looks more like a hedgehog, so I call him a hedgehog. I know it's a turtle. I get it. But the build we're going to be talking about is the Punchy Boy build, where you just punch the hell out of everything. So, once again, this is another important character where I think we need to look at the description of the queue first, so we can kind of explain why you're doing the things we're doing. So, you punch ahead with your powerful fist and cause 700 normal damage to a small area in front of you. For every 1 meter of movement speed, you get, not movement speed. For every 1 meter of movement, you get a stack of fist sensation for 2 seconds. Every stack increases your striking punch damage by 5%. Obviously, this isn't directly a movement speed, like the faster you move, the more damage you do, but it is kind of, there's just kind of a middleman there. Because you can travel more meters per second the faster you're moving, which means you're getting more stacks of fist sensation, which means you're doing more damage. So every stack of fist sensation increases the damage by 5%. And for every 1 meter of movement, you get an additional stack that will decay every 2 seconds. So we've got that down. Great. Let's talk about the first part of this build, and that would be Dominating Fist. It is a remnant, which says the stacks of your fist sensation will not drop below 20%. What does this mean? This means if you're not moving at all, you're standing still, you're going no meters, then you have 20 fist sensation, which is a 100% damage buff to your striking fist. This is on here for a very, 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 very straightforward reason of you don't have to be moving and you get a 100% damage bonus. And now all of your movement speed is on top of that 100% damage bonus. Making sure you can't decay below 20 is so pivotal for a build where the whole plan is kind of like the bird, where the bird just wanted to spam the E. In this build, you just want to spam your Q. You just want to punch the hell out of everybody. This could be called the Mike Tyson build. That's all you're going to be doing is fisting enemies. So, Dominating Fist is on here, so you get that permanent damage buff without having to worry about, like, even if you haven't found any movement speed, you've been super unlucky, you still have a good chunk of damage here. Next up, we have an Ascension for the Hedgehog, and that would go to Rogue Wave. So for every stack of Fist Sensation, it increases the next striking punch damage by even more, and then you gain 4, 6, and 8 stacks of Fist Sensation immediately after using Hurdle. What is Hurdle? Well, if you use your E ability, then your dash becomes a hurdle. So you can only do it while you're in your E, but you get increased stacks of Fist Sensation after using it. And at tier 3, you increase the duration of your stacks to 3 seconds instead of 2 seconds. So why is this good? Well, once again, now every stack of Fist Sensation increases your striking punch damage by even more. If we have this at tier 3, and we have Dominating Fist, then if we stand still and punch, we have a plus 100% buff, plus an additional 200% buff on top of it because of this Rogue Wave here. Or, sorry, 400%. It's 400% because it's a 20% for every stack, which would be an additional 400%. So, 500% for just standing still. And the faster you move, the more that's going to do. I mean, does that not just sound like it's stupid? Well, let me, spoiler alert, it is stupid. It is extremely stupid. And, I mean, you could just have that, and that would be a build, and you'd win the run with just that. So anything else on top of that is just extra. Now, the next one that is extra, we're going to talk about is kind of the part that makes this build fun. If it wasn't for this, then this build would be so much less fun and not exciting to do. But because of this one, it makes it a lot more fun, and that would be Wave Breaking Blow. Every 8 stacks of Fist Sensation will consume 1 additional striking punch upon casting it. So for every 8 stacks of your fisting, you do an additional punch. Now it performs the punch with 40% damage, and you can only get up to 4 extra punches at most, but if any of the punches kill, you recover uses when consumed. So at maximum, you could be doing 5 punches, and even if the 4 of those punches are doing 40% damage, I promise you, your damage numbers are going to be so ridiculous anyway. Almost every enemy will die to these 5 punches. If you're doing maximum amount of punches, they will die. And then you recover all of your uses, and then you do it again. And you recover your uses, and you do it again, and you recover, and you do it again. And then we're in the situation where it's just like the bird, where you're just spamming E, so this time you're just spamming the Q button. And it hits like a truck, it rips through enemies, you've got pretty good movement speed by default, and since you're going to be building movement speed, you're probably going to be moving pretty quick, which can help you dodge stuff, get out of danger. It is one of the more ridiculously broken builds that's on here. With, I guess, maybe not ridiculously broken, I mean it is, but maybe just one of the easiest ways to get broken. Once again, besides just the dog, all you have to do is pick up Atomic Bomb, but this is probably second in terms of how easy it is to just break so easily and become such an easy game. So that was part 3. And then for honorable mentions, I'm not going to put a single thing here. I'm just going to say movement speed buffs. The entirety of the movement speed buff category, anything in the game, whether it's other ascensions, whether it's scrolls, whether it's remnants, I don't give a shit what it is. More movement speed is better, and that is our honorable mention. Anything movement speed related is what you're going to want to go towards. So there we have it for the Hedgehog. And now we get into the fun, the new characters. Dun, 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 dun. What do I think are the best builds on the new characters? Well, let's start with the monkey. For the monkey, I've done a lot of, this has been my most played character. I've done a lot of testing. I've had a lot of fun. And I really do think that the best build for the monkey is his weapon buff build with his Q. So once again, this is another example where if you don't know what his Q does, let's read it. You draw out soul essence from your bracelet, deal 500 damage to up to 4 enemies, you reduce their movement speed, and extract their souls to enhance your own weapon. You get +2 temporary weapon levels for 6 seconds. Now, at first glance, +2 weapon levels, you're kind of like, it's not really doing much for me. Well, let's talk about this build, shall we? So first and foremost, the kind of juicy portion of this build is Concentrated Essence. This is an ascension on the monkey where hitting an enemy with Essence Chain reduces your, enhances your weapons with additional levels. It also extends the duration that you get these enhancements. At tier 3, you also get an extra level for every enemy that you hit with your shackle, which by default, you can hit up to 4 enemies. So if you hit 4 enemies, then you get +13 weapon levels every time you use your Q if this is at tier 3. Now, +2 weapon levels, that's kind of whatever. +13 weapon levels, that is delicioso, okay? It does a lot of extra damage, and it is really, really fun. Even, like, you can notice the difference immediately. Like, you can make almost any weapon's damage viable at most levels of the game. And it's the only character that can do that, and I think that that's really, really cool. So, that's why we have Concentrated Essence on here. It's kind of the big, meaty part. Like, you need to have this if you're going to be doing a weapon buff build, where you're just going to try to pump your weapon to crazy heights. Next up on the weapon buff category is another ascension, and that would go to Ancient Etching. So with Ancient Etching, you add an additional normal, rare, or exclusive inscription is added to all of your weapons, which will take effect when the weapon is enhanced. So this only happens when your weapon's enhanced, but most of the run, you should have an enhanced weapon if you're using your Q correctly, which is like all the time. You want to be using your Q pretty often. And if you get this to tier 3, you get an additional exclusive inscription. Why is this in the top 3? It's pretty straightforward and simple. Yes, correct. But this whole build is all about buffing your weapon. Most of the time, it's going to be with weapon level. However, adding additional inscriptions to a weapon is just... I mean, I've talked about this many times before in other videos, but I think weapon inscriptions, there are some weapons that are above this or below this, but most of the time, weapon inscriptions will make or break the weapon. Some weapons are just so good it doesn't matter, and some weapons are so shit it doesn't matter, but most of the time, the inscriptions on the weapon will decide if it's going to be a good weapon or a bad weapon. And adding an additional inscription is very useful. And then if you get this to tier 3, you add an additional exclusive inscription, and in 95% of scenarios, exclusive inscriptions are going to instantly make the weapon very, very viable, regardless of your other inscriptions. And more often than not, you're going to get something that's actually insane on the weapon. That's why it's a legendary exclusive inscription, because of how good it is. So Ancient Etching, when you're doing a build to buff weapons, I think is so goddamn useful, and just cannot be overlooked. It needs to be a part of the build if you're going for a weapon buff build. Third on the list goes to a scroll, and this one is another one that is just, it's not easy to get, but you gotta look for it, and if you see it, it's an instant take regardless of everything else, and that would be Hidden Transaction. There is a 33% chance to enhance a weapon by +1 extra level when you enhance your weapons at a craftsman. You want to try to get this obviously as early as possible. Basically, your whole goal is to try to get a weapon as high of a level as possible, as well as adding some extra inscriptions to it. So you want to be going to a craftsman every time with money, and have enough money to upgrade it 3 times, and statistically speaking, 1 out of every 3 times with Hidden Transaction, you're going to get an additional extra weapon level. So basically, at every craftsman, you're getting +4, which that'll add up over time. It really will. Not to mention, if you get a little extra lucky, you might get even more. And then if you get the enhanced version, then things can just go bonkers, because you can craft or enhance an additional time at every single craftsman, which is crazy. But even just the base one, that's going to help you get to super high levels. If you didn't watch the video yesterday where I had a +67 Firefish, then you can watch it to see how basically this entire build works, because this is the exact build that I did in that video. And it definitely might seem towards the end like, oh, what, the damage doesn't seem that crazy. But our highest damage dealt with a Firefish was like 200-some thousand in a single shot. That is a rifle, mind you. That is a rifle doing 200,000 damage in a single instance of damage, which is nuts. And that's what weapon level 67 will do for you. So, Hidden Transaction, I think, is a great part of this build, and something that is just, you need to look for it, and it needs to be like an instant take, regardless of any other scroll options. Last up, we have the honorable mention for the monkey, and that'll go to a remnant, and it would be Jackpot, where you get 2,000 copper immediately, and then plus 50% to all of your copper gained. This one is a very simple explanation of, you want to have enough money to upgrade your weapon 3 times at every craftsman. So additional copper instantly is great, and then additional copper for the entirety of the run is great. So this is one that usually I recommend getting it second and taking Ultimate Gambler first, but if you want to be super risky and say, I know I'm going to get good ascensions, I believe the game's got my back, baby, let's go. We go way back, all the way back to 2019 when I first started playing. I got this. Then go for it. Take Jackpot first. You'll be able to upgrade +3 at, theoretically, every single craftsman in the game. You'll never miss an upgrade. And once again, it's on here because money is very important in this build, and this is a very, very good money remnant. So honorable mention goes to Jackpot. And last, but certainly not least, in fact, probably besides maybe the Tiger, the highest damage potential in the entirety of the game, goes to our Firefox friend. And what build are we going for? You guessed it, it's an E build. Now, her Q build is very good and has a lot of potential, but I've always been a proponent, after playing many times, I really do think that the E is just overall better. So let's read the Fox's E, shall we? You cast a Shockwave, which deals 350 fire damage to enemies along the way. Every 1 energy consumed, you can consume up to 60 energy, during the charge will boost the damage by 2%. So if you use all 60 energy, that's a 120% damage boost. The ability will evolve when you consume 30 energy, which will increase the damage, AoE, and AoE range by 100%. So now we're up to 220%. The initial maximum energy is 60, and you restore 2 energy per second automatically, or 2 energy when killing enemies with fire damage. So, it's all about using your E and consuming a lot of energy to deal a lot of damage. First part of this build goes to a Ascension. Sorry, not a Remnant, an Ascension. And fun fact, I guess I won't give you any spoilers, but anyways, first goes to Firefox Blessing, which is after Spiritual Flame evolves, deal an additional hit for 50, 75, or 100% damage. But the big thing is at tier 2 here, where Spiritual Flame can evolve a second time at 60 energy for an additional 50% damage in AoE range. So if you consume 60 energy, it evolves twice, dealing even more damage and dealing even more area, like hitting an even wider area. This ability is known as a room clearing ability. Like, it can clear rooms, and this is how you do it, by getting this additional AoE. Not to mention, you get it to tier 3, and it'll also, oh, by the way, leave a burning path behind, which will deal 25% damage every half a second for 3 seconds. So, this encapsulates, it gives you additional damage, it gives you additional AoE, and it gives you some damage over time. There's nothing more you could want in an Ascension than this. I mean, it is just phenomenal, and it is, in my opinion, the best Ascension for this E build. It is so useful, and it will 100% help you to actually make this a room clearing ability where it can actually just wipe out the entire room in one single E. It's ridiculous, it's insane, and that's why we have it as one of the top 3 here. Next goes to Energetic Spirit. So you get additional max energy and additional energy recovery speed. And then the really important thing, I mean, that is very important, but the big thing is at tier 3, you get your energy consumption can exceed 60, so you can use more than 60 energy, and for every additional 30 energy consumed, you get plus 0.5% damage bonus to all energy consumed for the Spiritual Flame. So if you get to tier 3 and you have plus 120 max energy, and you consume all of it, you're going to be hitting, the damage increase is unreal. Unreal. Plus, let's say you have this on top of the Firefox's Blessing, so you have an evolved version of it. I mean, the reason that this character is so fucking broken is because of how much damage stacking you can do. There is a ridiculous amount of things that buff the damage you can do here, and it's all built into her kit. Which is why, when we look at the next thing in our top 3, it's another Ascension, because it's all part of her kit. She does not need any outside help. The outside help is just extra. This character is busted beyond belief. So let's go ahead and talk about that third thing, shall we? And that would be Conflagration. You get additional Spiritual Flame base damage and additional damage bonus for current attack for each energy point consumed. Also, at tier 3, you increase your damage by up to 100% based on travel distance. So let's wrap our head around everything we have just talked about and how much damage stacking is going on. So we have Firefox's Blessing, which allows you to evolve the ability a second time, and you just get a little bit of bonus damage as well. And a little bit of a damage over time effect at tier 3. So we've got that going. Next up, we've got Energetic Spirit, which gives us plus 120 extra energy, so we're at 180 energy now. And then for every energy consumed, we deal more damage, which is great. We love to see that. And then we come here, and this gives us additional damage for every energy consumed. So if we have this at tier 3, and we have 180 energy, that's going to be 540% additional damage. Oh, by the way, also, we have just a 450% base damage increase. So 480% damage, or no, 540% plus 450% if we're using all of our energy in one attack, and then an additional 100% if it travels far enough. This ability alone, if you have Energetic Spirit, is a over 1,000% buff to this weapon's damage. Over 1,000, and that is just this one alone. So if you use all 3 of these, you get them all to tier 3, and then you get a couple of extra things to help. A little bit of skill damage here and there. I mean, if you haven't seen any crazy builds on this, or crazy runs, then I got a couple on the channel. I mean, you need to see this in action because it is, like I said, just ridiculous how broken this character's kit is. Her kit is ridiculous. She needs no outside help, and that's why all 3 of the top 3 for this build was just her Ascensions, because that's all she needs. I do have an honorable mention, though, and it will go to a Remnant. However, it is an exclusive Remnant. But the Remnant is Raging Inferno, and it was hard to not put this in, but as you could tell, based on the other 3 things, there's no room to put this in the top 3. But Raging Inferno is a Remnant that says you get plus 15% base damage of Spiritual Flame for every enemy hit by it. You lose 10 stacks if you miss all enemies, and this can go up to 30 stacks. You also recover energy a little bit faster. You can see on the right, at maximum, it gives you plus 450 base damage. Another way to just help stack the damage numbers. I don't know what to tell you. There's more damage stacking here than ever before seen. It's ridiculous. And they said they're making some changes. They didn't say to this character, but they're making some changes at the end of the month. I would not be shocked if this character gets nerfed. So go run this build while you can. Go sprint to your keyboards, wipe off the Cheeto dust, and go run this character before she gets nerfed. I think she will. Maybe she won't. There's a lot of really broken builds, but this one just seems so busted. Anyway, that's it. We've finally done it. We have gotten through the best builds for every character, the updated version, the DLC characters included, and here we are. Let me know some of your favorite builds down below, whether they're some that I mentioned or some that I didn't mention. I'd love to hear it, as always. Yeah, this is fun. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for all the support. Plenty more videos to come, so hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, check out those links down below. Hopefully you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend, or you might not be watching this on the weekend, so hopefully you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I love each and every one of your faces, and I will catch you all in the next video.